Hello once again. In this class, we will go over the previous SSC past questions, and you will find useful tips and tricks alongside the correct answers and solutions for all biology questions. Likewise, we will be using the exam guide app, and you can download and practice more past questions using the app. Let's get started if you're ready. Let's start with question 1. We have about 50 questions here looking at us, and in this particular exercise, we're going to be looking at the options and see how we can explain actually how we got the answers to these particular questions. So we have question 1. Which of the following statement about living things is correct? Now, the particular topic that explains this correctly and helps you understand this particular question is characteristics of living things. Now, living things are actually things that have life in them, and they show certain characteristics. These characteristics are actually summarized as Mr. Niger card. The M stands for movement, the R stands for respiration, the N stands for nutrition, the I stands for irritability, G for growth, E for excretion, R for reproduction, C there, which is the card, stands for competition, adaptation, as well as death. Now, if you look at the questions they gave there, or the options that is given there, you will understand with me. The first one, they said animals respire using carbon dioxide as a raw material. They use it as raw materials for respiration. Now, that is actually not true. It is not true. Now, respiration has to do with the process by which living organisms break down simple sugars in order to release energy, and it is carried out by a series of chemical reactions that are controlled by enzymes. Actually, during respiration, living organisms take in air or make use of oxygen and bring out carbon dioxide as an excretory waste, not as a raw material it uses for respiration. Now, option B says growth in plants is limited after some time. Now, one of the major differences between plants and animals as it relates to growth, for now, growth actually is defined as the permanent or irreversible increase in the size of an organism. Now, if you look at the difference between plants and animals based on growth, you will understand with me that animal growth is unlimited. It simply means that plant growth is rather unlimited. It means that plants continue growing throughout their lifespan or their life cycle. So plant growth is unlimited, while animal growth is limited. Now, option B also is not correct, because option B says that growth in plants is limited after some time. And I'm here telling you that plant growth is not limited. It is unlimited. Option C says most plants respond to stimulus slowly. Most plants respond to stimulus slowly. Now, in terms of stimulus, what is stimulus? Stimulus is simply a change in the external environment, a change in the external environment. And the particular aspect of characteristics of living things that actually relates with stimulus is irritability or sensitivity. Now, irritability is simply the ability of living organisms to respond to certain changes in their environment, which is also called stimulus. So, if you look at differences between plants and animal, most plants response to stimulus is slow, and in most animals the response to stimulus is really quick or fast. So option C can be accepted as the correct statement about living things. And option D says higher animals can reproduce asexually. Now, higher animals do not reproduce asexually. Now, higher animals we're actually looking at, it relates to the vertebrates. When we have the Pisces, we have the amphibians, we have the reptiles, the aves, which are the birds, and then the mammals. They do not reproduce asexually. They reproduce sexually, and mostly fertilization, sexually by fertilization. So our correct answer to this particular question of number 1 is C. Now moving to question 2. Organ level of organization in living things is found in. Organ level of organization in living things is found in. Now, also you need to understand what is organizations of life, because this talks about the levels of organizations of life. And we have about 4 important organizations of life, or 4 important levels of organizations of life. The first level of organization of life is called the cell. And I said cell is actually the smallest, the simplest, basic, functional, fundamental, and structural unit of life. Okay? Now, there is no life actually apart from the life of a cell. Some living organisms exist as a single cell, while some exist as many-celled organisms. Now, those that exist as a single cell, in quotes, they are actually referred to as unicellular organisms, while the ones that exist as more than one cell, they are called multicellular organisms. Multicellular organisms. Now, examples of unicellular organisms include the amoeba, we have the euglena, we have the chlamydomonas, we have the paramecium, the plasmodium, bacteria. They all fall under the unicellular organisms. And then we have the multicellular organisms, which has to do with higher plants, higher animals. You can also include the fungi. You can also include so many other organisms that fall under this category. Then we also have the second level of organization of life, and that second level is actually called tissues. Tissues. Now, tissues are simply aggregates of cells, or cells which aggregate together, or groups of similar cells which aggregate together to carry out a particular function. The aggregation of similar cells to carry out a particular function. And there are what we call plant cells and plant tissues, and we also have animal tissues. An example of plant tissues, we have the collenchyma, we have the phloem, we have the xylem, we have the cambium, we have the sclerenchyma, and so on. These are tissues that are found in plants. And tissues that are found in animals, we have the likes of the skin is also, not the skin, we have the blood is a tissue. We have the bones, they are also referred to as tissues. We have the cartilage, it is also an example of a tissue. There are also organisms that exist as tissues. They exist as tissues. They don't have organs, they're not made up of systems, they are just made up of what? Tissues. An example is Hydra. So Hydra is also another example of an organism that exists solely as a tissue. Now, the third level of organization of life is organ. Organ. Now, an organ is an aggregate, or has to do with the aggregate of similar tissues that carry out a particular function. Aggregation of similar tissues, and they carry out a particular function. Now, some examples of organs in terms of plants, we have the stem, we have the roots, we have the leaves, we have the flowers. These are actually organs that are found in plants. Now, organs that are found in animals, we have the kidney, we have the lungs, we have the skin, we have the heart, and so many other organs that are found in living organisms, or mostly in animals. And then finally, we have the systems. Now, the systems are simply aggregates of similar organs which carry out a particular function. And we have the likes of the examples of systems. We have the excretory system, we have the digestive system, we have the circulatory system, the transport system, the nervous system, respiratory system, and so on. These are systems. And if you check those topics, you will see it has to do with organs that come together to carry out the function of a particular idea or a particular thing in the human body. Now, if you look at this particular question, option A says water leaf plant. water leaf plant. Now that is a plant. It is a full system. It is a full organism. Now option B said virus particle. Now virus can be classified in this respect. If it is found inside the cell of a living host, it can be called a cell. Okay, so it can exist, or we can classify it as a cell if it is found in the cells of a living host. And then option C says kidney. Kidney is an example of an organ which is the third level of organization in living things. And then option D says spermatozoa. Now the spermatozoa is a cell, the sperm cells. It's called the sperm cells. It is a cell. So it exists as a cell. So the question, organ level of organization in living organisms or in living things, is found. The correct answer to this question is C, and that is the kidney. Now moving to the next question. We have the diagram X and Y. Below are illustrations of transverse section of a part of plants. Now they said study them and the questions below. Now if you look at that particular question, there is a diagram given there, a particular diagram given there. Now the question says, which of the following statement is not correct? Is not correct. Diagram X and Y are sections of. Now if you look at that, that is a transverse section that was done there. Now, is it a transverse section of the leaf? Is it a transverse section of the stem or shoots? Or is it a transverse section of the roots? Now, if you look at the diagram there, you can easily spot out the root hairs. Those are those hair-like structures you see around the transverse section, around the outer part of the section. Those are the root hairs. So that is a pointer to let you understand that that particular diagram talks about the roots of plants. So option A says roots, option B says a dicotyledonous root and a monocotyledonous root respectively, and then C says vascular bundles, and then D says stem. So stem is out of the question, so option D can be ruled out. Option C, they were not actually, that does not show us. X and Y is nothing about vascular bundles. Nothing about vascular bundles. So the two options that we should be looking at is option A and option B, because they talk about the roots. Now, option A is generally roots. And if you check the two diagrams we have there, they are not the same. So it means that one should be called a different thing and the other one should be called a different thing. Now, option B is the correct answer to this particular question. For X, X is a dicotyledonous root, as you can see how it is there, and then Y is a monocotyledonous root. X is a dicotyledonous root and Y is a monocotyledonous root. So the correct answer to this question is B, option B. We have the next one. The part responsible, they still say we should look at the same diagram, still the same diagram. Diagram X and Y below are illustrations of a transverse section of a part of plant. Study them and answer the question below. Now, the question is, the part responsible for conducting water and dissolved mineral salt from the soil to the leaves is the part labeled what? Now, if you go very close to the diagram there we have, if you look at, we have option Roman figure 1, we have Roman figure 2, we have Roman figure 3, and then we have Roman figure 4. Now, the part that is responsible for conducting water and dissolved mineral salt is actually the xylem tissue. The xylem tissue. The phloem tissue is actually responsible for transporting manufactured food from the leaves of the plant to the roots and as well as to other parts of the plants where it is needed. But in terms of conduction or transportation of water and dissolved mineral salts, it takes place from the roots. the root hairs absorbs it, and then the xylem tissue aids the conduction or the transportation of these water and dissolved mineral salts. Now, from what we have there in the diagram, the correct answer to this question is option A, which is Roman figure 1. Roman figure 1. Now, if I'm saying this very clearly, Roman figure 2 can be referred to as the pith, P-I-T-H. And Roman figure 3 should be called the cortex. Now, mostly the pith is usually not found in the dicotyledonous roots of a plant, but it can be found in the monocotyledonous roots of a plant. Please take note. And I think if I'm saying this very clearly, Roman figure 4 is known as the root hairs. Roman figure 4 is the root hairs. Now look at the next question, still on the same diagram. Still on the same diagram. They said diagram X and Y are below are illustrations of transverse sections of the part of a plant. Study them and answer the questions below. Now they said the part labeled 2. The part labeled 2, I just mentioned it. I said the part labeled 2 is the pith. It is not the phloem. It is also not the endodermis. Please take note, it is the pith. So the pith is the opening. It is just a hollow or an opening found mostly in the monocotyledonous part of or root of a plant. And then you can also see it in the dicotyledonous stem of a plant. All right. Now look at the next question we have there. They said the organelles in cells, which are also referred to as suicidal bags, are they suicidal bags? Now, the options that are given is something you should take note of, okay? We have what we call organelles. They are found in the cytoplasm of the cell. They are found in the cytoplasm of the cell. And these organelles, they carry out different functions. You can find them both in plant cells as well as in animal cells. Now, the first option we have there is the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria, sometimes it is referred to as the powerhouse of the cell. And the reason why it is called the powerhouse of the cell is actually that the mitochondria, that is the site for cellular respiration. Remember, I defined respiration as the breaking down of food substances by a series of chemical reactions which are controlled by enzymes in order to release energy. So energy is released in the cells or to the cells through the mitochondria. That is where cellular respiration takes place. That is where breaking down of food substances or complex food substances takes place in order to release energy. So it is therefore referred to as the powerhouse of the cell. Now, option B says the lysosomes rather. Now, the lysosomes, as the name implied, it lies. To lyse means to split or to destroy or to shatter. Now, the lysosome contains what we call hydrolytic enzymes. Now, these hydrolytic enzymes are used actually to digest complex molecules inside the cells or the cytoplasms of the cell. They are used to digest complex molecules in the cytoplasm of the cell. However, if they are released inside the cell or inside the cytoplasm of the cell, they end up destroying the cells itself. So it is called, hence, a suicidal bag. So the correct answer to this question is option B, lysosomes. But look at option C. Option C said ribosomes. Now, the major functions of the ribosomes is for protein synthesis. That is where protein is being synthesized or produced. And then option D says nuclei. Now, nuclei talks about two nucleus, okay? But we have the nucleus in the cytoplasm of a cell. Now, the major function of the nucleus is that it carries hereditary materials which can be transmitted or transferred from parents to their offspring. So they contain genes. So please take note. The correct answer to this particular question, which is the organelles in the cells that is referred to as suicidal bag, the correct answer is the lysosomes. The lysosomes. Now look at the next question there. They said the process that brings about the shrinking of a spirogyral cell, that brings about the shrinking of a spirogyral cell when placed in a strong solution. When placed in a strong solution. Now, this particular question should help you remember or have a recall on the topic called cell and its environment. And in that particular topic on cell and its environment, I try to make us understand that the cells are always in a watery environment, and their material, there are mostly materials that enters and leave the cells frequently. And these materials that enter and leave the cells, the process that explains better how materials enter and leave the cells are three processes, three phenomena. We have diffusion, we have what we call active transport, and then osmosis. Now, in this case, it relates so much to osmosis. Now, what is osmosis? Osmosis can simply be defined as the movement of water molecules from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. Now, through a semi-permeable membrane. Now, for osmosis to occur, there are conditions that are necessary for this to happen. One, there must be a hypertonic solution. Number two, there must be a hypotonic solution. And number three, there must be a cell membrane. Now, what do we mean by hypertonic solution? It means that the solution must be concentrated. It must have more solute in it. Then also, I said there must be a hypotonic solution. Now, what is actually a hypotonic solution? A solution that is dilute. Now, hypotonic solution, an example is salt water, or water that has salt in it, much salt content in it. And then a hypotonic solution can just be called, an example can be distilled water. All right. Now take a look at the scenario they said there, they painted there in that particular question. The process that brings about the shrinking of a spirogyral cell when it is placed in a strong solution. And I told you that a strong solution is a hypertonic solution. It means that the contents of the cell of spirogyra is hypotonic. Are you getting me? So it's dilute compared to the environment, which is a strong solution. Now, what happens in this case? Of course, the spirogyral cell has a cell membrane, which acts as a semi-permeable membrane. So it means that water will move from the region of lower concentration to the region of higher concentration. It means that water will begin to leave the cell, because inside of the cell of the spirogyra, the concentration is low then compared to the one that is outside the body, outside the spirogyral cell, which is what? Strong, and that's hypertonic. So water starts leaving the cells of the spirogyra. So what happens when you start removing water from a thing? It begins to shrink. Hence the word, the shrinking of the spirogyral cells. So it begins to shrink. Now that process in biology, we call that plasmolysis. Plasmolysis. So option A, that is not osmosis. Some persons might still say, yes, that's osmosis that is taking place. Yes, but if you look at it, one of the applications of osmosis is plasmolysis. So plasmolysis tells you about the shrinking process, how it begins to shrink, okay? Because we also have other applications of osmosis, like the hemolysis. In hemolysis, there is no shrinkage of the cell. Rather, the cells begin to absorb water because the content of the cell is hypertonic, or is a strong solution, while the environment is a weak solution. So water begins to enter into the cell. We call that process in biology hemolysis. Most times it happens with the red blood cells. So the red blood cells begin to swell. And if it continues to a particular point, it will then burst or lyse. It will then burst or lyse, and that's destruction of the cells. The same thing applies in this case, but in this case, plasmolysis, it has to do with what? The shrinking of the cell. So our correct answer to this particular question is option C, which has to do with what? Plasmolysis, the shrinkage. Please take note again. Once the cell begins to swell as a result of water entering into it, we call that hemolysis. But when it begins to shrink as a result of water leaving it, we call that plasmolysis. Next question. The region of a plant stem in which cells divide to increase its diameter is the... Now, that brings us to a dicotyledonous plant. In a dicotyledonous plant, there is what we call vascular bundles. Now, these vascular bundles, we have 3 vascular bundles mostly in dicotyledonous plants. But in monocotyledonous plants, we have 2. With the 2 in monocotyledonous plants include the xylem as well as the phloem. I have made mention about xylem and phloem. We said that the xylem, they conduct water and dissolve mineral salt. The phloem, they conduct manufactured food from the leaves where they are manufactured to the roots and other parts of the plant. Now, as it relates, in terms of dicotyledonous plants, the 3rd vascular bundle is called the cambium. The cambium is usually found between the phloem and the xylem, the cambium. One of the major functions of the cambium is what we call secondary thickening. Secondary thickening of the shoots of a plant. And that secondary thickening increases the diameter of the bark of a plant. That is, the width of the plant is increased by the function of the cambium. So the correct answer to that question is option A, not B. B conducts manufactured food, not C. C mostly conducts water and dissolved mineral salts, and also not D. D serves as a supporting tissue. It provides strength, it provides rigidity and support to mostly young plants that are growing up. Yes, to mostly young plants. And another major function of the collenchyma is for flexibility and resilience. The flexibility and resilience simply means the ability of a particular plant to bend without breaking. That's resilience. Ability to bend without breaking. So that's one of the major functions of the collenchyma, aside the function of being a supporting tissue. Outside being a supporting tissue. So please take note, the correct answer to this question that brings about the increase in the diameter or width of the shoot of a plant, which we call secondary thickening, is called what? The cambium. It's called the cambium. So the correct option is A. Now, the next question says the total number of caudal vertebrae in animals X and Y is respectively, in X and Y is 4 and 27 respectively. The animals are likely to be, so we're looking at animals that have a particular number of vertebrae. Now, the vertebral column is actually the backbone. The vertebral column is the backbone. Now, the backbone, mostly in mammals, the backbones are divided into about 5 major groups. In man, we have the cervical vertebrae, we have the thoracic, we have the lumbar, and then we have the sacral and caudal. Now, in man, we have about 33 vertebrae, that is the bones in the backbone. We have 33 vertebrae. Now, for the cervical is made up of 7 vertebrae, and it is found at the neck region. In fact, the first cervical and the second cervical are the atlas and the axis. They are found at the neck region. The atlas and the axis fuse together to help the nodding and the turning of the head. So the second group of the cervical vertebrae of the vertebral column is the thoracic. After the cervical, we have the thoracic. The thoracic vertebrae is located at the chest region. And they are about 12 in number. Now, after the thoracic vertebrae, we have the lumbar vertebrae. The lumbar vertebrae is located at the upper abdomen, and they are 5 in number. After the lumbar vertebrae, we have the sacral vertebrae. It is located at the lower abdomen, the lower abdomen. It is also 5 in number. Now, after the lumbar vertebrae, sacral vertebrae, we have what we call the caudal vertebrae. Another name for the caudal vertebrae is called the tailbone. It is located at the tail region. Now, in humans, the tail region is 4. It is not so much because humans don't have tails. Humans don't have tails. But there are several mammals that have tails. So in other words, their tailbone should be more in number compared to that of human. Now, if you look at all the options we have there, option A says fish and human. It means that humans have the caudal vertebrae is about 27, and that's not true. I said the human vertebrae, the caudal vertebrae in humans, they are 4. The reason why it is so few is because humans don't have tails. And then B, we have the toad and the rat, which is also not correct. Option C, we have the toad and the fish, which is also not correct. But option D, the humans have 4 caudal vertebrae, and the rats, they have 27 caudal vertebrae. So the correct option to this particular question is D, humans and rats. Next question, which of the following blood components has the greatest affinity for oxygen and carbon dioxide? Greatest affinity for oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now, the blood is what we call a tissue fluid. It aids to transport essential materials around the body of a living organism that has it. Now, mostly in terms of mammals. It helps to, in fact, not only mammals, vertebrates. It helps to transport essential materials around the body of most vertebrates. Now, the blood is divided into 2 main parts or components. We have what we call the blood cells, and then we have what we call the blood plasma. Now, the blood plasma makes the blood liquid, is the liquid part of the blood. But the blood cells are also divided into 3 major parts or types. We have what we call the red blood cells, we have the white blood cells, and then we have the platelets. Now, the platelets are also called the thrombocytes. The thrombocytes. One of their major functions is clotting of blood. They aid the clotting of blood. They are rather small in size. And then the next one, the next type of blood cells we have is the white blood cells, WBC. Now, the white blood cells, another name for the white blood cells is called the leukocytes. Leukocytes. Now, they are actually made up of lymphocytes. Now, these lymphocytes are what produce what we call antibodies. And one of the major functions of the antibodies is for defense. They help to protect the body against foreign invasion or foreign cells. Any cells that is not supposed to be in your body, once they get inside, the white blood cell releases its antibodies to actually defend or digest or destroy these foreign cells that have entered into the body. And then the other type of blood cells is the red blood cells. The red blood cells, they are also called erythrocytes. They are also called erythrocytes. Now, one major function of the red blood cells is to transport oxygen from the lungs to other parts of the body where they are needed, and also to transport carbon dioxide from other parts of the body where they are being used to the lungs so that they can be excreted out of the body. Now, how does the red blood cell carry out this major function? The red blood cells is made up of a pigment, a red pigment, and that pigment is called hemoglobin. It is made up of iron, it's an iron compound, hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin has a strong affinity for oxygen and carbon dioxide. Has a strong affinity for it. Now, once a blood that is deoxygenated gets to the lungs, it becomes oxygenated. Why? The hemoglobin that is found in the red blood cell bonds with the oxygen to form what we call oxyhemoglobin. to form oxyhemoglobin. And then it can transport this oxygen from the lungs back to the heart, and from the heart it is then distributed to other parts of the body. The same way too, oxygenated blood, when it exchanges the oxygen in the blood with the cells releases the carbon dioxide, which is an excretory waste, to the blood. And this same hemoglobin, since it has a strong affinity for carbon 4 oxide, will also bond with the carbon 4 oxide to form carboxyl hemoglobin. And then it is also carried back to the heart, and from the heart it is now seen as a deoxygenated blood. It now goes back to the heart, and from the heart to the lungs, where it is also gaseous exchange takes place. It releases the carbon 4 oxide back to the lungs and then takes in the oxygen, and the cycle continues again and again. So if you look at the particular options we have here, option A says the lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are found in white blood cells. Lymphocytes has nothing to do with transportation of oxygen and carbon 4 oxide. Option B says erythrocytes. And I told you another name for erythrocytes is called the red blood cells. And I said to you that the red blood cells, they contain an iron compound which is called hemoglobin. And this hemoglobin have strong affinity or likeness for oxygen as well as carbon 4 oxide. So our correct answer to this particular question is option B. Option B. Next question. They said use the following processes to answer the question below. Use the following processes to answer the questions below. Now, Roman figure 1 says ribs move upward and outward. Upward and outward. And then number 2 says diaphragm relaxes. Number 3 says volume of thorax increases. Number 4 says that air is forced out of the lungs. Now, which of the processes takes place during inspiration? During inspiration. Now, what is actually inspiration? For you to understand this better, you also need to note what respiration is. Now, there are respiration, I've defined this several times in this presentation. I've said that respiration is the breaking down of complex food substances by series of chemical reactions controlled by enzymes in order to release energy. Actually, there are two types of respiration. We have aerobic and then we have anaerobic. Now, under aerobic respiration, there are two important stages of respiration. These two important stages are the external respiration, and then we have the internal respiration. External respiration, internal respiration. Internal respiration can also be called tissue respiration or cellular respiration. Now, tissue respiration has to do with the release of energy, where oxygen is used to break down substances, food substances, in order to release energy. But external respiration, another name for external respiration is gaseous exchange. Gaseous exchange. Some persons, if you ask them what is respiration, they simply tell you it is the breathing in of air and the breathing out of air. That is what we call external respiration. It is not the totality of the definition of respiration. The totality of the definition of respiration is when this air is being taken in that contains oxygen, the oxygen is then used to break down food substances in order to release energy. And that is why we said the major purpose for respiration is not just the taking of air, but the release of energy. And that release of energy is based on or begins when air is being taken and the oxygen in air is used for bringing out or producing energy by breaking complex food substances. So now, external respiration has to do with gaseous exchange. And there are two types of external respiration. We have what we call inhalation or inspiration. Inhalation or inspiration simply has to do with the breathing in of air. Exhalation is the breathing out of air. Another name for breathing out of air is called exhalation. It's called exhalation, or you can call it expiration. So we have two types of external respiration. We have the inspiration or inhalation, and number two, we have the exhalation or expiration. So breathing in is inspiration, breathing out is expiration. All right. So now what they are asking us is inspiration, the taking in of air. What happens to the body? How does the body, there are several parts of the body that plays major role when air is being taken into the body. That's what we're looking at. Now, Roman figure 1 said the rib cage moves upwards and outward. That's one of the things that happens. And in fact, what happens during inspiration is that the rib moves upwards and outward. The diaphragm does not relax. It contracts in this way. It contracts, it doesn't relax. Now, once the diaphragm contracts, the volume of the thorax increases so as to accommodate air inside the lungs. So the volume of the thorax increases and air is not forced out, but air down enters into the lungs. That is inspiration, breathing in. Then breathing out is what happens during breathing out is that the rib cage moves downwards and inwards. It moves downwards and inwards. The diaphragm relaxes, the volume of the thorax decreases, and then air is forced out of the lungs. So if you look at what we have said here so far, during inspiration, it is only one, Roman figure 1 and Roman figure 3 that occur. Roman figure 1 and Roman figure 3 that takes place. What is Roman figure 1? The rib moves upward and outward, and then the volume of the thorax increases. So these are the two things that majorly happens. Excuse me. These are the two things that majorly happen. So our correct answer is A, which is Roman figure 1 and Roman figure 3 only. Roman figure 1 and 3 only. Next question. Use the following processes to answer the question below. Still the same thing. They said the ribs move upwards and outwards. Roman figure 2, diaphragm relaxes. Roman figure 3, volume of thorax increases. And Roman figure 4, air is forced out of the lungs. Now they said which of the processes is direct result of the contraction of the intercostal muscles. Contraction of the intercostal muscles. Please take note. Every time the intercostal muscles contract, it means that the diaphragm is relaxing. Now, the diaphragm relaxes to form what we call a dome shape. It relaxes. So what happens is during expiration, the contraction of the intercostal muscles occurs during expiration. During expiration, and that is when the rib moves downwards and inwards, the diaphragm relaxes, the volume of the thorax decreases, and air is forced out of what? The lungs. So the correct answer to this particular question is Roman figure 2. So the intercostal muscles contract and then the diaphragm relaxes to form a dome shape. Next is question 13. Now, the process by which the amount of waters and solutes in the blood are controlled is known as what? That is the regulation of the amount of water and solute or salt in the blood is controlled by, or controlled, what is it called, that process? Now, the part of the topic in biology is referred to as regulation of the internal environment. Now, there are several imbalances based on the kind of foods we eat and also the kind of exercise we involve ourselves in and all that. Now, if the body does not maintain a fairly constant internal environment, there's going to be a very big problem to the body. Very big problem to the body. Now, hemolysis, remember, let me just go through the options. Hemolysis has nothing. In fact, it actually relates with the balance of salt and water balance. Diffusion has nothing to do with this. Diffusion is simply the movement of of molecules or ions from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration until it is evenly distributed. C says turgidity. Well, to an extent, turgidity does not have anything to do with the balancing. Turgidity is when water enters into a particular cell and the cell begins to stretch till it is fully stretched. It does not lyse or burst. It becomes fully stretched. At that point where it is fully stretched, in biology we say it is become turgid. It has now become what? Turgid. And then A says hemolysis. Hemolysis is when water enters into a cell and the cell begins to swell to the point that it passes the line of turgidity. It passes the state of turgidity. It will then lyse, hence the name lysis. It will then lyse or split or burst. So that is hemolysis. But osmoregulation is maintaining a balance. Osmoregulation is a type, or is an example or a type of homeostasis. It's maintaining a balance between salt and water in the body. We talked about, what the question talked about is solute. Solute is actually a substance that can dissolve in a solvent. And salt is a solute that can dissolve in a solvent. So the body maintaining a salt and water balance is what we call osmoregulation. And one of the organs that is responsible for osmoregulation in humans is the kidney. So the kidney carries out the function of excretion. The kidney also carries out the function of what? Osmoregulation. Please take note. The correct answer to this question is osmoregulation, maintaining a balance between the amount of salt, amount of solute or salt and water in the blood of a living organism. Next, we have a table here. They said the tables below shows the effects of hormones. Roman figure 1, Roman figure 2, 3, and 4 on some parts of human body. Now, where they tick good represents effect, and where they tick bad represents no effect of hormone on the corresponding part of the body. So study it and answer the questions below. Now, if you could see clearly the table is actually a bit smaller, but if you could see it, I believe you will agree with me on the effects on, where you have the Roman figures, that is hormones. The hormones are Roman figure 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Then the next one is heart. Please take note. The next is heart. And after the heart, we have the digestive system. After the digestive system, we have the kidney. And after the kidney, we have the uterus. Please flow with me. We have hormone. That is, you're looking at the column, the upper column. Okay, not the rows. Now, we have the hormone. Under the hormone, we have Roman figure 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, move to the next. We have the heart. We have, after the heart, move to the next. That is digestive system. Move to the next. That is the kidney. Move to the next. That is the uterus. Now look at the question. They said, which of the following hormones are 1, 2, 3, and 4, respectively? Now, look at the hormones they gave. We have ADH. That is the antidiuretic hormone. We have the glucagon. One of the functions of the glucagon is to convert sugar from the liver back to from the liver and put it back from glycogen, convert it back from glycogen to glucose. And so it goes back to the blood. Then we have the estrogen, which is a sex hormone found in women. And then we have the adrenal hormone, which is also called an emergency hormone. It is the hormone that controls anxiety and every other thing, fear. It increases heartbeat and so on. So that is the adrenaline. Now look at these 4 hormones. Now, the first one, let's look at the effects. Now, if you check Roman figure 1, it had an effect on the heart. It had an effect on digestive system. It has an effect on the kidney. It has an effect on the uterus. Now, which hormone do you think will have effect in all these organs? For me, I would say it is the adrenaline, or the adrenal gland that produces the adrenaline hormone. The adrenaline hormone increases heartbeat, okay? It can also stimulate your digestive system, very correct. It also stimulates your kidney, the functions of your kidney. It also plays a major role in the uterus, in the uterus. So you can see that the adrenaline hormone plays a major role in all these effects. It plays a major role. So we have the adrenaline. Now, Roman figure 2, there is no effect on the heart, there is no effect on the digestive system, but there is an effect in the kidney, but there is no effect in the uterus. Now, that is majorly the antidiuretic hormone. If you go back and look at the excretory system and the functions of the kidney, now the kidney plays an excretory function during production of urine formation inside the tubules. We have 3 stages. The first stage is ultrafiltration, which occurs at the Bowman's capsule. And then we have the selective reabsorption that takes place at the proximal convoluted tubules and the Henle's loop. And then the next one is selective reabsorption. No, selective reabsorption. And the last one is hormonal secretion. The hormonal secretion that takes place in the distal convoluted tubules or collecting convoluted tubules, that is where the ADH acts mostly. The ADH is produced by the pituitary gland. So it functions mostly at the kidney. So in other words, Roman figure 3, the hormone there is the antidiuretic hormone, which is the ADH. And then Roman figure 4 definitely should be the glucagon. No, Roman figure 3, then we have, it has no effect in the heart. It has no effect in the digestive system. It has no effect in the kidney, but it has effect in the uterus. And of course, that tells us that that is the estrogen, the female sex hormone. Remember the female sex hormone, there are 2 of it. We have the progesterone and then we have the estrogen. So they play a major role in the female reproductive system, which the uterus is a part of it. And then also we have the glucagon. Now, not the glucagon, Roman figure 4, yes, that is the glucagon. Now, the glucagon, one of the major functions of the glucagon is to convert glycogen back to glucose. The function of the insulin, which is also a hormone, converts excess glucose into glycogen, and which is, with the help of the liver, it is then stored in the liver. But when the blood sugar is low, the glucagon converts the stored glucose, which is in the form of glycogen, converts it from glycogen into glucose, which is then released back into the blood. And as you can see the effect, in the heart, there is no effect. In the digestive system, there is an effect. In the kidney, no effect. In the uterus, no effect. Well, we can take that for the glucagon because glucose comes from the digestive system. Is it true? Yes. The end product of carbohydrate is actually what? Glucose. So it has an effect relating to what? The digestive system. So the correct answer to this particular question is option D. Remember we said that Roman figure 1 is the adrenaline hormone. Roman figure 2, because of the effect on the kidney, we said it is the ADH. Roman figure 3, because of the effect on the uterus, we said it's the estrogen. And Roman figure 4, we said it is the glucagon because of the effect on the digestive system, Next is the next question, still on the same table. They said the hormone responsible for anxiety. I already mentioned this. The hormone responsible for anxiety, which is also called the emergency hormone. Anxiety, the hormone for fear, quick response. That is the adrenaline hormone. And the correct option is A, which is Roman figure 1. Roman figure 1. Next is the ear. The ear is a very important sense organ. A very important sex organ. Remember, we have the 5 senses. We have the eyes. We have the nose. We have the tongue. We have the ear. And then we have the skin. The skin. Now, the ear plays a major role of sound, being able to detect sound. And the ear is actually divided into 3 major parts. We have the outer ear, which is the one you can see. Mostly this external part is called the pinna. It's called the pinna. Then it also is made up of an auditory canal, that is an opening that leads to the eardrum. okay, the auditory canal, which leads to the eardrum. All these parts I just mentioned, they are the external part of the ear. We also have the middle ear. The middle ear is mainly made up of bones, small bones. In fact, they are called the smallest bones of the body, the smallest bones of the body. And these bones are called ossicles. We have about 3 types of them. We have the malleus, yes, which looks like a hammer. We have, okay, we call it the hammer, which looks like a malleus. It's called the malleus. We also have the stirrup. We have the anvil. These are the 3 bones that are found in the middle ear. The middle ear is also made up of what we call the eustachian tube. The eustachian tube is actually connected to the throat through the nostrils, a part of the throat, which is the pharynx. Okay, that's where you get the eustachian tube. And then we have the cochlea, we have other parts of the ear, the semicircular canals, and so many other parts of the ear. These are the the inner part of the ear. Now, the question says the diagram below is an illustration of some parts of a mammalian ear. Study it and answer the questions below. Now, the parts labeled 1 are they. Now, if you carefully look at it, that is the middle ear. The part labeled 1 is the middle ear. Option A says, is it the semicircular canal? Option B says, is the ossicles. Option C says, is the cochlea. Option D says, is the external auditory meatus. It is wrong. The correct answer to this is the ossicle. Remember, I said that the middle ear is actually made up of the ossicle and the eustachian tube. So the correct answer to this is the ossicle, okay, which are small bones found in the ear. Next question. Now, let's look at this particular question concerning the ear. Now, the ear, as we can see in the structure we have here, is actually divided into 3 major parts. And of course, you know that the ear is a sense organ, one of the sense organs. We have 5 sense organs. We have the eyes, the nose, the ear, the skin, and then the tongue. These are the sense organs we have. So looking at the ear, it is divided into 3 major parts. Now, these 3 major parts include the outer ear, the middle ear, and then the inner ear. The outer, the middle, and the inner ear. Now, the outer ear consists of the external part of the ear, which is the pinna. We also have the auditory canal, which is a passage into the middle ear, and then we have the eardrum. These are what make up the outer part of the ear. We have the pinna, we have the auditory canal, and then we have the eardrum. That's the outer part of the ear. We also have the middle part of the ear, which consists of the ossicles as well as the eustachian tube. Now, the ossicles are actually small bones that are found in the ear that also helps to transmit sounds. Now, these small bones are made up of 3 bones. We have them as the malleus, we have the incus, and then we have the stape. These are the 3 bones that are found in the middle ear that make up what we call the ossicles. Also, we said the eustachian tube. Now, the eustachian tube actually connects to the upper part of the throat, the upper part, close to the nostrils, and that is usually the pharynx. So it connects to it. It passes in through that part. And then we have the inner ear. The inner ear is actually made up of the cochlea. We also have part of the brain connected to it. We also have the semicircular canal and so many other parts that makes up the outer ear. And based on the question we have here, they said which of the parts are correctly grouped. Please note the word correctly grouped. Inner, middle, and then outer. So we're starting with the inner ear. Now, looking at the structure, the inner ear is represented with Roman figure 2. Roman figure 2. And then after Roman figure 2, we have the middle ear. As you can see there, the middle ear is represented with Roman figure 1 as well as Roman figure 3. That is the ossicles and then the eustachian tube. That's Roman figure 1 and 3. And then we have the outer part of the ear, which is represented with Roman figure 4. And that is the auditory canal or meatus, auditory meatus, or you can call it the auditory canal. So the correct answer to this particular question is option D, which is 2, 1, 3, and then 4. Option D is the correct answer. Now, next question, still on the ear. The question is, the middle ear is connected to the pharynx by the part labeled what? I have also mentioned this just previously in the previous question. I said that the middle ear consists of the ossicles as well as the eustachian tube. The ossicle is located there in the middle ear. That's represented with Roman figure 1. And then the eustachian tube is represented with Roman figure 3. So the correct answer, the one that actually connects with the pharynx, is the eustachian tube, which is Roman figure 3. So our correct answer to this is C. C. Next question. We can see two structures there, two diagrams. We have P and then we have Q. Now the question is, the diagram below are illustrations of two different cells involved in a biological process. Now this biological process, as you're looking at it, is reproduction. So involved in a biological process in mammals. Study them and answer the questions below. Now before we go to the questions below, I want you to understand something about reproduction. Reproduction is actually a biological process in which living organisms give rise to new individuals after their kind, or you can say of the same species. Now, the major purpose for reproduction is to ensure the continuity of life, We have two types of reproduction. We have what we call the asexual reproduction, and then we have sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction does not involve the production, nor does it involve the union of what we call gametes. Now, gametes are simply defined as sex cells. There are cells that are involved in sex, okay, that determines sex or determines development of a human or of a person or a new individual, or that is involved in reproduction. Cells involved in reproduction are referred to as sex cells, or you can call them reproductive sex cells. Okay? Now, sexual reproduction is actually the production and also the union of these reproductive sex cells. Now, also, I want you to understand a major difference between sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, two parent organisms are involved. Two parent organisms. But in sexual reproduction, only one parent, in asexual reproduction rather, one parent cell is involved. Please note this. One parent cell is involved in asexual. But in sexual reproduction, it is two parent cell that is involved. Two parent cell. Now, look at this. As we relate to sexual reproduction, because what we're looking at on the screen is all about sexual reproduction. We have two types of sexual reproduction. We have what we call fertilization, and then we have what we call conjugation. Now, I'm not going that much into them, but fertilization has to do with the union of these sex cells. It has to do with the union of these sex cells. Now, what actually completes reproduction or fertilization is when the nucleus of both sex cells unite together. Now, P is called the male sex cell, and the male sex cell in terms of mammals is called the spermatozoa. Q is the female sex cell, and the female sex cell in terms of mammals is called the egg. Now, look at the labels that is given there. you will see that label in terms of P, which is the male sex cell, you will see the label Roman figure 3. And then in the female sex cell, which is diagram Q, you will see the label Roman figure 1. Now, Roman figure 3 in the male cell is referred to as the nucleus of the male sex cell. And then in terms of Roman figure 1 in the female sex cell, it's its own nucleus. Now, the nucleus contains what we call genes. And these genes contain hereditary materials that can be transferred from parents to their offspring. So when they unite together, they form what we call a zygote. And the traits from the sperm cell, which is from the father or the male, and that of the female unite together to give rise to a new individual with different traits from both parents. Is that understood? Now, so if we look at the question, they said which part of P and Q fuse to complete the biological process? Fuse to complete the biological process. Like I said, to complete fertilization, which is a biological process, it has to do with the nucleus. So the correct answer is 3 and 1. Roman figure 3 and 1, and that is A. A. So we have question 20. Which of the following statements about P and Q is correct? Still on sexual reproduction. P and Q is correct. Now, option A says both cells are structures for asexual reproduction. I told you that asexual reproduction involves only one parent cell. And of course, what we can see here is two parent cells producing two different sex cells. And I also told you that in terms of asexual reproduction, there is no production and there is no union of gametes. No production of sex cells, no union of sex cells. But here in this question, there is a sex cell, both male and female sex cells. So option A is totally out of the question. It's never correct. Then option B, both cells normally belong to the same individual. Not true. Now, when we're looking at mostly animals or mostly mammals, as it relates to mammals, mammals are not hermaphrodites. Mammals are not bisexual. Mammals are unisexual animals. So there is a male and there is a female. A male producing the male sex cell during biological intimacy, and then the female producing the female sex cell. So in mammals, bisexuality is not seen. So we have unisexuality. And then option C says both cells are found in plants. Now, plants has nothing to do, though plants have their own sex cells, but the sex cell of a plant, the male sex cell of a plant is not the sperm cells. The female sex cell of a plant is not the egg cells. Now, the male sex cell of a plant is called the pollen grains, and the female sex cell of a plant is called the ovule, O-V-U-L-E, the ovule. In terms of male, it is referred to as the pollen grains. So option C is also out of the question. And then option D, we said the question says the option says the union of both cells give rise to a new mammal, and that is very correct. So our correct answer here is D, option D. Next question. Still also on reproduction. They said if the number of chromosomes in the skin cells of mammal is 46, how many chromosomes will be found in P and Q respectively? Now, I'll take your mind back to a particular topic called cellular growth, which involves cell division. And this cell division includes the two types of cell division, mitosis, as well as the other one we called meiosis. Now, one thing you should note about mitosis is that it occurs in somatic cells. Okay? Mitosis occurs in somatic cells. Now, during mitosis mitosis actually occurs in cells that are not involved in sexual reproduction. Any cell that is not involved in the production of gametes is undergoing mitotic cell division. So we have asexual reproduction as mitotic cell division. There is mitotic cell division in asexual reproduction. There is mitotic cell division in growth. There is mitotic cell division in development, and so on. So you observe mitotic cell division in these areas or in these processes, but not in sexual reproduction. Why? Because there is production of gametes. Now, one thing you should take note under mitotic cell division is that when a parent cell divides into daughter cells, the daughter cells are diploid. Now, what do we mean by diploid? It means that the number of chromosomes in the parent cell is the same as that in the daughter cells. They carry the same chromosome. So if the parent cell has the total number of chromosomes to be 46, the daughter cells will also, each of them have 46. But in meiosis, it occurs only during sexual reproduction or during the production of gametes. Sexual meiosis occurs only during the production of gametes. Now, the parent organisms, when the parent cell, once they produce daughter cells, which can be the sperm cells and all that, once they produce their cells, each of their cells are haploid. Please note, in meiosis, we have haploid cells in the organisms. But in mitosis, we have diploid cells in the organisms. Now, haploid cells means that the number of chromosomes in the daughter cells is half compared to the number of chromosomes in the parent cell. So if the parent cell has a total of 46, it means that the daughter cells will also have the total number of 23. That is half the number of the parent cell. So if you look at that particular question, the correct answer to this question is A. So we have 23 and 23. Okay? Next. In which of the following structure is simple sugar produced? Simple sugar produced. Now, the production of simple sugar has to do with the process of photosynthesis. Now, what is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is actually the process by which green plants, please take note, green plants manufacture their food in the presence of sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. Now, if you have paid attention to the definition I just gave, you will also understand that I have mentioned some conditions that are necessary for photosynthesis to actually occur. One of them I mentioned is green plants. And what makes the organelle that makes a plant green is called the chloroplast. Okay, the chloroplast contains a pigment called chlorophyll that actually makes a plant green. And one of the major functions of the chlorophyll is to trap energy of the sun and use it to split water. So you will hear more of that under plant nutrition, but we're not looking at plant nutrition now. So please take note, one of the conditions necessary for photosynthesis to occur is that there must be a presence of chlorophyll or a chloroplast. And number two, I mentioned sunlight. Number three, I mentioned water. And then number four, I mentioned carbon dioxide. Now, if you look at in terms of organelles in a cell. Now, the organelle in a cell that relates with production of, or that relates with photosynthesis is the chloroplast, not the food vacuole. The question did not say that produces, the question did not say that stores simple sugar or food substances. The food vacuoles in plants helps to store food. The cytoplasm is just an environment, the internal environment for organelles to be there. And then the chloroplast plays a major role in terms of photosynthesis. And cell wall is what gives shape. The structure is made up of cellulose. So it has nothing to do with the production of simple sugar. The correct answer, because one of the byproducts of photosynthesis is actually simple sugar as well as the release of oxygen. That's how you test a plant if it has actually, or prove that a plant has actually undergone photosynthesis. So the correct answer to this particular question is C, and that is chloroplast. That is the chloroplast. So we have it as C. Next question. Still on photosynthesis, an evidence of the occurrence of photosynthesis in an experiment is I repeat again, an evidence of the occurrence of photosynthesis in an experiment is the A. Now, what I told you before, that the evidence that a plant has actually undergone photosynthesis, I told you about two things that must be taken note of. One is the release of oxygen, and number two is actually the formation of simple sugars. Formation of simple sugar. Now, if you look at the option A, they said release of carbon dioxide, no. You look at option B, release of oxygen, yes. Option C, formation of water molecules, and then option D. But the correct answer to this question is option B, the release of oxygen. Next question is the major source of vitamin A. The major source of vitamin A is, now understand that vitamins are actually one of the classes of food. We have about 7 classes of food. We have carbohydrates, proteins, fats and oils, mineral salts, vitamins, roughages, and as well as water. And these are the classes of food we have. Vitamins is one of the classes of food. And one of the major functions of vitamins is to keep us healthy and strong, to prevent diseases and infections. Now, vitamins are actually, we have about several types of vitamins. We have what we call vitamin A, we have vitamin B, we have vitamin C, we have vitamin D, E, and then vitamin K. Now, vitamins also can be grouped based on their solubility in some solvents. Now, based on solubility, we have 2 types of vitamins. We have the fat-soluble vitamins, and then we have the water-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble in fats, and then water-soluble, they are soluble in water. Now, the fat-soluble vitamins include vitamin A, vitamin D, A, D, E, and K. The 4 of them are fat-soluble vitamins. And then vitamin B and C are water-soluble vitamins. Water-soluble vitamins. Now, what are some of the sources of vitamin A? Now, there are several sources. In fact, they include mostly fruits and vegetables. We have the carrots, we have the egg, we have palm oils. There are so many of them that are good sources of vitamin A. Now, the major function of vitamin A is for proper vision. It aids proper vision, and that's why its deficiency, the deficiency of vitamin A, is that it causes what we call night blindness. Now, other deficiencies, or the deficiencies of other vitamins like vitamin B, causes beriberi. Deficiency of vitamin C causes what we call scurvy. Deficiency of vitamin D causes what we call rickets. Deficiency of vitamin E causes sterility or infertility. And then deficiency of vitamin K causes hemorrhage or hemophilia. So if you look at the options we have here, the major source of vitamin A is option A. Egg yolk, carrots, as well as palm oils. And then we have the next one. They said here diagram J is a protease. Now, protease is an example of a digestive enzyme. Now, they said diagram J is a protease, while diagram K, L, M, and N are food substances. Study them and answer the questions below. Now, if you look at it there, like I said before, protease is a digestive enzyme. Now, what are enzymes? Enzymes are simply organic catalysts, or you can call them chemical substances. They are chemical substances that speed up the rate of chemical reactions or metabolic processes in the body, but they are not used up at the end of the reaction. They are not used up at the end of the reaction. Now, if you look at the diagram we have there, protease. Look at the shape or the structure of the protease, and then look at the shapes of the substrates or the food substances that are there. Now, one major characteristic of an enzyme is that they are specific in action, or you can say that they act on specific substrates. They act on specific substrates. So there is a particular substrate or food substance that a digestive enzyme will work on. For instance, the saliva contains thiolane. Now, thiolane can only work on carbohydrates. It cannot work on proteins, neither will it work on fats and oils. So it works only on carbohydrates. So they are actually specific in their actions. Now, look at the structure. Which of these structures, K, L, M, and N, do you think will fit in with protease? Now, if you look at K, K won't fit in. If you look at L, L will, M will not, and N will not. So the correct answer to this particular question is B. Next question, still on enzymes. They said protease J will react with the particle illustrated substance because, let me take it again, protease J will react with the particular illustrated substance or food substance because the enzymes A there says are denatured at high temperature. Denatured at high temperature. Yes, of course. That's one of the characteristics of an enzyme. They can be denatured at high temperature, and that's why they work at specific temperature, mostly body temperature. And then B says are specific in their actions. Now, as it relates to the substrate they act on, the correct option is what? B. But please take note, all other options are characteristics of an enzyme. Enzymes are denatured at high temperature. Enzymes are specific in their actions. Enzymes remain unchanged after a reaction. Enzymes speed up the rate of chemical reaction. These are all their characteristics. But as it relates to this particular question, the correct answer is B. They are specific in their action. I also told you that they act on a particular or specific substrate. So the correct answer is B. Next question. Still on enzymes. After a reaction between protease J and the food substance, the end product will be what? Now, please take note. Protease is an enzyme or a digestive enzyme that breaks down complex protein molecules into simple absorbable forms. I repeat, they break down complex protein molecules into simple absorbable forms. Now, for carbohydrates, the simple absorbable form of carbohydrate is glucose. For fats and oils, it is fatty acid and glycerol. For proteins, it is amino acid. So the correct answer is not option A, which is fatty acids. It is not option B, which is glucose, but correctly it is option C, which is amino acids, and not option D. Water does not undergo digestion. So enzymes don't react with water. There is no digestive enzyme that reacts with water to break it down into anything. So the correct answer is C, option C, amino acid. So we are looking at this particular question, the property of clay soil that prevents it from supporting thick vegetation is, now what is soil? Soil can simply be referred to as the topmost layer of the earth on which plants grow and also animals carry out their activities. Now we have different types of soil, but in biology we're going to be considering three types of soil. We have the sandy soil, we have the clay soil, and then we have the loamy soil. Sandy soil is actually a type of soil that is made up of sand. The particles there are coarse, they are loosely packed together, and so their porosity is very high. And because of this, sandy soil is the least water holding capacity, has the least water holding capacity. And the nutrients are so small, hence they support scanty vegetation. They support scanty vegetation. Then we also have the clay soil. Clay soil, they are made up of clay, and the particles that are found in clay soil, they are smooth, they are not coarse, they are not rough, they are smooth, and they are small. And the particles are also closely packed together. And because of this, clay soil is referred to as the soil that has the highest water holding capacity because there is no porosity. The porosity is very slow, or very low rather. Low porosity, but very high water holding capacity. And also clay soils don't have much nutrient in it, and so they do not support scanty vegetation. And then finally, we also have the loamy soil. Loamy soil is the best soil for planting. It has it has both sand and clay, and it also has, very important, an organic matter called humus. And humus also helps to improve soil fertility and brings a good yield of plants. Loamy soil supports very thick vegetation because of the humus that is present in the soil. Now, looking at this particular question we have here, option A says, or the question says that the property of clay soil that prevents it from supporting thick vegetation is A, composition of chemically weeded granite rocks? No. B, say inability to retain much water? No. I've already told you that clay soil has the highest water holding capacity. And option C said tendency of becoming waterlogged. Now, if it can retain water, it means that the soil can easily be waterlogged. And then D said porosity and low water retaining ability. That's not true. So the correct answer to this particular question is option C. Option C, and that is tendency of becoming waterlogged. And then the next one is 29. Which of the following practices will not maintain soil fertility? Will not maintain soil fertility. Now, option A says preventing soil erosion. Preventing soil erosion will maintain soil fertility. Now, what is erosion? Is actually the washing away of the top layer of the soil. And in so doing, when the top layer of the soil is being washed away, the nutrients of the soil is also washed away. And that brings about low fertility of that particular soil. Now, bush fallowing will not. Rather, it encourages soil fertility. Option C says leaving the land bare. Now, when you leave a particular soil bare without having grasses or bush following it or trees that serve as windbreakers, you are actually exposing that land or that particular soil to different agents of erosion. We have agents of erosion like the the wind erosion and the water erosion. You are actually exposing them to erosion. So leaving the land bare cannot maintain soil fertility. And then D, planting cover crops. Cover crops is also another way of maintaining soil fertility. So looking at the option of the question, the correct option to this question is C, leaving the land bare. Leaving the land bare is a practice that will not maintain soil fertility. So our correct option is C. Next question. A group of organisms of the same species living in a particular place is known as, it is not colony. Now, colony is there, but it is not colony. Now, colony has to do with group of organisms living in a particular spot or a place together, and they depend on each other for life. Okay, they depend solely on each other. An example is the volvox. It is a colony of cells. all right? They depend on each other. They are never independent on each other. So that is an example of a colony. We also have a community. Now, community has to do with both, it has to do with number of organisms of the same species actually living in a particular place, or different species, both plants. We have a plant community, we have animal community, but they are living in a particular place. But that's not the answer. Ecosystem is a community of plants and animals functioning together with their non-living environment. Option D says population. Population is actually the total number of organisms of the same species living in a particular place at a particular time. So the correct answer to this particular question is population. Population. Next question. Now, look at this diagram here. The diagram below is an illustration of an experiment on sedimentation of soil. Now, use it to answer the questions below. Now, looking at that setup there, we have sedimentation of soil. That means you get a particular soil and then you add water to it and allow it to sediment or to settle. Now, once that water settles, you are going to see various portions or layers of the soil. Now, the organic component of the soil will be found at the top of the setup of the layer. So Roman figure 1 is usually where you get organic components. Roman figure 2, where we have water, it is a mixture of both water and a little clay. Then Roman figure 2, you now have more of clay soil. Roman figure 3, you have silt. In some books, they will tell you sand. Then Roman figure 4, you then have the gravels. But if there is an absence of gravels, you have silt. And then at the base, which is Roman figure 4, you have sand. So our correct answer to this particular question, they said the organic component of the soil is labeled what? The correct answer is A, which is Roman figure 1. Still on the same question, they said the part labeled 4 is, I just told you, Roman figure 1 is the organic matter or components that are found there. Then we have, after that, you have water mixed with a little clay. And then Roman figure 2, you have clay, slight clay. And then Roman figure 3, you're supposed to see what we call this, the silt soil. And then Roman figure 4 is what you have as sand. So our correct answer to this particular question is Roman figure 4, which is sand. Sand. Next question. Which of the following pyramid is not used in ecology? Which of the following pyramid is not used in ecology? Now, pyramid of energy, there is pyramid of energy. Now, it shows the flow of energy from one trophic level to another trophic level in a food chain. And it's also important for you to note that the pyramid of energy decreases as you move from the first trophic level to the final trophic level, which is moving from producers to consumers, to the last consumer. The pyramid of energy, the flow of energy decreases. It decreases drastically. We also have pyramid of numbers. It talks about the number of organisms in each trophic level in a food chain. In each trophic level in a food chain. So we are looking at the number of organisms, just the same way we spoke about pyramid of energy. In pyramid of numbers, the number of organisms also decreases as you move from the first trophic level, which is producers, to the final consumers, which is the last trophic level. Then we also have pyramid of biomass. Now, biomass talks about the mass, the total mass of living organisms in a particular ecosystem, okay? We have also what we call pyramid of biomass, but there is nothing like pyramid of organisms. So the pyramid that is not used in ecology is actually pyramid of organisms. So we have pyramid of energy, pyramid of numbers, and then also of biomass. So the correct option here that is not used is D, option D. Moving ahead, we were given a question here that says, study the food chain illustrated below and use it to answer the questions below. Now, what is a food chain? A food chain is a linear feeding relationship that shows the transfer of energy and nutrients from one organisms to another, mostly from producers to their final consumer. Please take note, in a normal food chain, it starts from a producer. A normal food chain begins with a producer and then ends with the tertiary consumer, which is the final consumer. Now, what we have here is a food chain that moves from J to K. There's supposed to be an arrow between J and K, and the arrow pointing towards K. There's also supposed to be an arrow between K and L, the arrow pointing towards L. Also another arrow between L and M, the arrow pointing towards M, and then M and N, the arrow pointing towards N. So that's a better representation of a food chain. What we have here is not a better representation of a food chain. Now, organism J, according to the question, is normally sustained by energy from. Now, J, like I said, a food chain begins with a producer. Now, what is a producer? A producer is actually a green plant that can manufacture its own food, and it needs the energy of the sun for it. So the ultimate source of energy in an ecosystem or in a food chain is actually the sun. So these green plants, which are producers, they depend on sunlight for energy. So option A is not the correct answer. Option B, carbohydrate, is not the correct answer. Option C, organism K, is not the correct answer. Where they obtain energy, their source of energy, is option D, and that is sunlight. Option D, sunlight. Next question. They also say, still study the food chain illustrated below and use it to answer the questions below. Now, which of the following statement about organism L is correct? Organism L. Now, let's see how we can interpret this food chain. Organism J is the producer. Organism K is the primary consumer because it feeds directly from J, or it derives its nutrient and energy directly from J, and organism L is the secondary consumer because it derives its energy and nutrient from organism K. Then organism M is a tertiary consumer because it derives its energy and nutrients from organism L. And organism N is also a tertiary consumer that derives its energy and also nutrient from organism M. Please note, so J, producer, K, primary consumer, L, secondary consumer, M, tertiary consumer, N, tertiary consumer. Now, options are A, it feeds on organism M. No. Organism L does not feed on organism M. It rather feeds on organism K. Then B says it is a primary consumer. That's also wrong. Organism K is the primary consumer. Option C said it is the producer. Wrong. It is not the producer. Organism J is the producer. And option D said it is a secondary consumer, and that is the correct answer. It is a secondary consumer. We still have the same question also on food chain. They said the position occupied by each organisms, that is J, K, L, M, and N, in a food chain is known as what? That is what we call the trophic level. Trophic level. Trophic level is simply each of the stages of organisms in a food chain or a food web. As we are looking at this particular question here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 trophic levels here. So the correct answer is trophic level. It is not food web. Food web is a complex feeding relationship that consists of more than 2 food chains. I have already talked about pyramid of energy, and there is nothing like energy level. Energy level, you see that more in physics. Okay? 37. Which of the following features is not an adaptation of plants to aquatic habitat? An adaptation of plants to aquatic habitats. Now, plants that are found in aquatic habitats are referred to as hydrophytes. They are called hydrophytes, while plants that are found mostly to adapt to very dry places where there are little or no water, they are referred to as xerophytes, Xerophytes, xerophytes. And then those that can stay in places that are not too dry and not too wet or too watery, they are called mesophytes. So we have plants that adapt to aquatic habitat to be called hydrophytes. Now the question is, which of the following features is not an adaptation? Now A says breathing roots. Now plants that are found in aquatic habitats, they have breathing roots. Now those breathing roots, sometimes they are called pneumatophores. Then B, flowers are raised above water to attract pollinations. That's very correct. Or pollinators. That's very correct. It is also found in plants that are adapting to aquatic habitat. Option C says spongy tissues containing gases for buoyancy. Yes, buoyancy simply means the ability to float. And then option D says hairy structures on the leaves to reduce water loss. And the correct option that is not an adaptation of plants to aquatic habitat is option D. Option D. Next question. The biological association that contributes directly to succession in a community. Directly to succession in a community. Now, succession has to do with a gradual change that is being observed in organisms from actually simple forms to actually more complex forms. Now, most times, one of this thing that brings about succession is, in terms of biological association, is actually competition. Predation is actually competition, like we all know, is living organisms struggling for all the necessities of life. Predation has nothing to do with succession because it has to do with, is a type of biological association in which one organism kills another organism for food. Parasitism also has nothing to do with succession or primary succession in the sense that parasitism is actually an organism, a kind of association between two organisms in which one benefits, the other one does not benefit, but is also harmed in the process. And then commensalism, or example of parasitism, is the relationship between tapeworm and man. The tapeworm benefits everything, but man does not benefit, and man is harmed in the process. Option D says commensalism. Commensalism is a type of biological association in which one benefits, but the other one does not benefit, but is not harmed in the process. An example is between the remora fish and the shark. The remora fish benefits so much, but the shark does not benefit anything from the remora fish and is not harmed in the process of that biological association. So the biological association that leads to succession or that contributes directly to succession is competition. Next is conservation of natural resources. The question there says the conservation of natural resources is enhanced by the following practices except. Now, first of all, what is conservation of natural resources? Now, conservation of natural resources is actually the judicious use of natural resources in order to ensure their continuous availability. Judicious use of natural resources in order to ensure their continuous availability. Now, let's look at the options we have there, whether they point towards ensuring continuous use or availability of these natural resources. Option A says controlling farming activities. Controlling farming activities. Option B says protecting endangered species. Option C says poaching in game reserves. Option D says establishing parks and gardens. Now, if you look at these options we have here, option A, controlling farming activities, is also a way of conserving natural resources. Controlling farming activities is a way of controlling or conserving natural resources, that is the forest and so many other things. And then option B, protecting endangered species. These are wildlife. Protecting wildlife. Now, endangered species are actually living organisms that can go extinct, okay? That can go extinct. So protecting them from extinction to ensure their continuous availability is what we call conservation of natural resources. Option D says establishment of parks and gardens, which is also a way of conserving forest and also wildlife. But option C, poaching. Poaching is a game where people kill animals for sports. They kill them for pleasure. They kill them for food. They use parts of their body and sell them to people for money and so many other things. That is what we call poaching. And poaching is never a way of conserving natural resources. They said, next question says, next question says, the burning of farmlands. The burning of farmlands should be discouraged because the burning of farmlands should be discouraged because A, it destroys organic components of the soil. Now, bush burning, that's what burning of farmlands mean. Bush burning, just setting up a particular vegetation on fire. Now, it has so much hazard. In fact, it's referred to as one of the environmental hazards based on the activities of man. One of the environmental hazards. It has so much effect in our ecosystem. Now, number one says it destroys the organic components of the soil, which is very true. It destroys soil organisms. And B says it increases the population of wild animals on the farm, which is not true. It doesn't increase the population. It rather destroys them. Option C said it increases dormancy period of some seeds. And option D says it destroys some plant pests. Now, they said the burning of farmland should be discouraged because it destroys the organic components of the soil. So the correct answer why bush burning or burning of farmland should be discouraged is that it destroys organic components of the soil. Next question. The use of a lighter instead of a matchstick is a way of conserving what? Now, please take note. A matchstick is actually gotten from the forest. It is made up of wood, okay? It's gotten from the forest. So if we reduce the amount of matchsticks that are being made, we are also helping to conserve the forest. So the use of lighter instead of matchsticks is a way of conserving not petroleum, not water, not wildlife, but mainly the forest. So our correct answer is option B. Next. An accident victim was successfully transfused with blood from the father whose blood group is AB. Now, the blood group of the accident victim is what? Now, blood transfusion is a very exciting topic that everyone needs to take note of as it relates to blood transfusion. Okay, sorry, blood transfusion is very exciting as it relates to the blood group rather. And we have different types of blood group. We have blood group O, we have blood group A, we have blood group B, and then we have blood group AB. These are the 4 different types of blood group we have. Now, blood group O is referred to as a universal donor. It means that blood group O can give blood to any of the groups. It can give blood to blood group A, it can give blood to blood group B, it can give blood to blood group AB, and it can also give blood to blood group O. Blood group A can only give blood to blood group A, but it can receive blood from blood group O and blood group A. It can receive blood from blood group O and blood group A, but it can only give blood to blood group A. The same thing with blood group B, can give blood to blood group B, but can receive blood from blood group B as well as blood group O. Now, the question we have here is blood group AB. Now, blood group AB is called a universal recipient. It means it can receive blood from every other blood group, but it can only give blood to its own blood group. So in other words, it can receive blood group from blood group A, it can receive blood from blood group B, it can receive blood from blood group O, it can also receive blood from blood group AB, but it can only give to blood group AB. Let me also rephrase this. I said blood group A can give blood to blood group A and AB. A and AB. The same thing, B can give blood to blood group B and AB. But they can only receive from O and their own blood group, which is A or B. But blood group AB can only give blood successfully or transfuse blood successfully to blood group AB and no other else. But it can receive blood from every other group. The same thing with blood group O. It can give blood to all other groups, but it can only receive from blood group O. So the question we have here, the blood group of the accident victim, if the father is blood group AB and there is a successful transfusion, the accident victim has a blood group of blood group AB. And that answer is option C. Now, the next question says, which of the following traits in humans is an example of physiological variation? Now, what is variation? Variation can simply be seen as differences, observable differences, which can occur within individuals of the same species. Within individuals of the same species, differences, observable differences. Now, based on these observable differences, we can say the differences can be both morphological and it can also be physiological. Morphological in the sense that you're looking at the physical expression, the physical observation, observable differences, and then physiological variation or physiological simply referring to the functions or their reactions to several environmental changes. Now, if we look at this, we have 2 types of variation. We have the morphological variation, we have the physiological variation. Now, morphological variation has to do with, like we said, the physical changes or observable differences. And these physical observable differences can be relating to what we call continuous variation. An example is height. Now, if you're looking at the height, there is changes. It is continuous. The change in height is continuous. You can go to a particular class, you see someone that is that's short, the shortest in the class, and then you see someone a bit taller than that person that is actually short, and someone taller than the other, taller than, you keep having this observable differences, physical differences you're observing within a particular species, okay? Now, physiological variation has to do with 2 extremes, all right? Physiological variation actually leads to what we call discontinuous variation. So in discontinuous variation, it is either you can do a particular thing or you can't function on that particular path. You can function in this or you cannot do this. You can do this, you cannot do this, or you can react to this condition or you cannot react to this particular condition. For instance, we have the tongue rolling of the tongue. Some persons can do that as if it's a function, it's a behavior. Some persons can roll their tongues while some cannot roll their tongue, all right? Some persons also can close one eye and open the other without the assistance of the hand, while some can do it without. Some persons cannot, some persons can. And that is what we call discontinuous variation. Now, based on the question we have here, which of the following traits in humans is an example of physiological variation? A is skin color, B is fingerprint, C is tongue rolling, and then D is height. The correct answer to this particular question is tongue rolling. Next question. Individuals belonging to blood group O, we've just mentioned this, we've talked about this, blood group O are universal donors. I said they can take blood from only blood group O. As it says here, donors, they can give to every other group. Now, why is it so? A, is it that the antigens are absent in their blood cells? B, is it members of their group constitutes the higher number of humans? C, is it there are no antibodies in their blood plasma? D, is it that the antigens in their blood cells are easily destroyed? The correct answer is A. Antigens are absent in their blood cells. Next question. 2 tall plants were crossed. Now, this talks about genetics. 2 tall plants were crossed, and all the F1 generations, which is the first filial generation plants, were tall. When the F1 plants were that is self-fertilized, self-pollination rather, took place, some of the F2 plants were tall, while the others were short. What are the possible genotypes of the original plant? Now, looking at this, I wish I can do a genetic diagram to show you. Now, if we have 2 tall plants were crossed, and all the 2 tall plants were crossed. If we have 2 tall plants that were crossed, we have big T, and big T, big T. And all the F1 generation were all tall. Now, when they were selved, some of the F2 generations, F2 plants were tall, while some or others were short. What is the possible genotype of the original plant? So we have big T, we can have a heterozygous tall plant, and which is big T, small t, crossing with a big T, small t. Now once they cross, we have big T, we also have big T, small t, we have big T, small t, and then one plant that is short and short. Now, they now ask the question, what are the possible genotype of the original plant? Possible genotype of the original plant. Now, from the options that are given here, the correct answer is not here. The correct option is not here. Because if 2 tall plants are crossed, it definitely, if the tall plants are homozygous and they cross, they will definitely give you a tall plant. But if it is a heterozygous tall plant that were crossed, the first filial generation will actually be what we are seeing, or what is asked in the F2 generation. That is, it is going to be a mixture of a tall plant and a short plant. But if the question states that a tall plant was crossed with a short plant, or a short dominant short plant, and a dominant tall plant, that is homozygous, definitely we can have our F1 generations to be all tall, and then our second generation to be tall and short in the ratio of 3:1. In the ratio of 3:1. So the possible genotype of the original plant, that's the 2 tall plants, is not in or among the options. The correct one is supposed to be big T, and small t, small t. It is not option A. Option A says big T, small t. Option B says big T. Option C says small t, and then option D the same. So for me, the correct answer for this particular question is not given in the options. Next question. Which of the following statement best describes a test cross? A test cross. Now, it is to determine the genotype of an individual whose phenotype is not known. That is very correct. Very correct. So it is used, but let's not just take that as the correct answer. Look at other options. B says to determine the phenotype of an individual whose genotype is known. No. We use test cross to find out the genotype of an organism. Then C says between the progeny of no, and then D says between two homozygous recessive. It is between two homozygous recessive plants to confirm the genotype, two homozygous recessive plants to confirm the genotype of the offspring. Which of the following statement best describes a test cross? It is. The correct answer here is option A. Option A. Because if we say it is crossing the resulting offspring or progeny with a homozygous recessive individual to confirm the genotype, then option D is correct. But option D says between two homozygous recessive, and that is not correct. Between two homozygous recessive, that is not correct. The correct answer to the question is to determine the genotype of an individual whose phenotype is not known. 47. Which of the following statement about sex-linked traits is not correct? Now, sex-linked traits are actually traits that are influenced by genes that are found in the X chromosomes. Now, the X chromosomes are actually, they contain genes, and these genes are what we call, they carry traits, and those traits are called sex-linked traits. Now, look at the options. Male inherits sex-linked traits from the fathers. B, sex-linked traits are common in males. Now, they said it is not correct. Female can be carriers because they can be heterozygous for the traits. And then C, males are never carriers since they only receive one sex chromosomes. The correct one that is not correct is option D. And then we have the next one. When two carriers of sickle cell anemia produce an offspring, the probability of the offspring being a sickler is. Now, if we look at the genotype of a sickler, of a healthy person, and then a carrier. Now, look at what they said. They said two carriers of sickle cell. Now, they can be represented using the genotype AS. AS. So if we have AS, and if they cross, the offspring that will be produced will be what? Now, if you do that, you are going to see offsprings that are healthy. All right? Now, the question says the probability of having offspring being a sickler. Its answer is simply 1:4. Because the ones that will not be a sickler, the one that is very healthy, not a carrier, is 1. The ones that will, the probability will be 1/4. The ones that are carriers will be 2/4, while the ones that are sicklers was now going to be 1/4. So the correct answer to this particular question is option B. Option B. 49. Which of the following organism exhibits adaptive coloration? Adaptive coloration. Now, what is adaptive coloration? These is actually the possession of colors by living organisms to ensure that they catch predators. They catch their prey and also escape predators or enemies in order to survive in a particular ecosystem or habitat. possession of colors. We have different types of adaptive coloration. We have what we call warning coloration. We have the Batesian mimicry. We have counter shading. We have so many of them. These are different types. Now, rabbits don't undergo or exhibit adaptive coloration. Mouse don't exhibit adaptive coloration. Dogs don't exhibit adaptive coloration, but chameleon exhibits adaptive coloration. Okay? And then finally, the final question, which of the following sequences is the correct evolutionary trend in organism, in living organism? Now, when you're looking at evolutionary trend, we have two types or two groups of evolutionary trend. It is from simple to complex, and the other one is from aquatic to terrestrial. Now, as what we have here in this particular question, what we're looking at is simple to complex. Now, look at this. This is based on plants, mostly plant kingdom. Looking at the plant kingdom, the simplest form, we said, excuse me, we said it is evolutionary trend from simple to complex. In plant kingdom, the simplest form is the talophytes. And the talophytes are actually algae. After the talophytes, we have the bryophytes. After the bryophytes, we then have the tracheophytes. The tracheophytes are subdivided into pteridophytes and spermatophytes. Spermatophytes are then divided into gymnosperms and angiosperms. Angiosperms is further divided into monocots and dicots. Now, if you look at this transition we have here, we said the simplest form of plant kingdom is the talophytes, which are algae. So option A begins with the algae. After the algae, we have the bryophytes, which are, an example of a bryophyte is the moss plant or the liverwort. After that, we have the ferns. Now, the ferns belong to the pteridophytes. After the ferns, then we have the angiosperms. So the correct trend, evolutionary trend in organisms as it relates to plants is A.